Life was simple and full of routine. Wake up, breakfast, work, dinner, sleep, repeat. I loved it though, because every evening my wife, Emily, and I would sit down for dinner, talk about our day, and unwind together. We'd been married for 8 years, and those little moments were the foundations of our trust and happiness. Emily was more than my wife. She was my best friend, my confidant. Lately, though, things had started to feel off. It began with small changes. Emily, who usually complained about her phone's battery dying, now made sure it was charged all the time. She began taking calls in another room, whispering as if every word was a prized secret. At first, I thought maybe she was planning a surprise for my upcoming birthday, but my birthday came and went, and the secretive calls didn't stop. Then there were the late nights at the office. Emily is a graphic designer and often talked about how her creativity sparked best under the quiet solitude of night. But these late nights became frequent, almost every other day. She would come home tired, with a distant look in her eyes that wasn't there before. One evening, as I cleaned up the dishes, Emily mentioned she had to return to the office to wrap up a project. "I'll probably be late again, just so you know," she said, kissing my cheek before grabbing her keys. The kiss, once a spark of warmth, now felt cold, mechanical. As she left, I noticed her laptop still open on the table, her project files displayed on the screen. It didn't add up. I tried to shake off the growing seed of doubt in my heart. Maybe she was stressed. Work can do that to a person. But the more I thought about it, the more the small changes began to form a pattern. Her phone always tilted screen down, our bank statements showing dinners, paid for two at times when I was eating alone at home. I needed to understand what was happening, not just for the sake of our marriage, but for my peace of mind. I decided to start paying more attention, noting the times she left and when she returned, checking our bank account more frequently, and observing her behavior around her phone. One night, as I pretended to sleep, I heard Emily's phone buzz. She quietly slipped out of bed and tiptoed into the bathroom. Curiosity overcame me, and I followed, standing quietly outside the door. Through the thin barrier, I heard her whisper, "I miss you too. I can't talk now. He might hear." The floor beneath me could have opened up and swallowed me whole. My heart pounded against my ribs like a prisoner wanting to escape. I leaned against the wall, feeling the paint's texture imprint on my skin as her words echoed in my ears. This wasn't just stress or extra work. Something was profoundly wrong. I knew then that I had to find out everything. The next morning, as Emily showered, I decided to take a step I never thought I would. I went to the garage, telling myself I was just grabbing a tool I needed, but in reality, I was looking for something, anything, that might help me understand. What I found instead in the glove compartment of her car was a box of contraceptives. We hadn't used those in years, not since I had a vasectomy. My hands trembled as I held the box, the pieces of my broken trust fitting together into a painful truth. Holding that box of contraceptives, my mind raced with confusion and hurt. Why would Emily need these? I thought back to the day, years ago, when we decided that I would have a vasectomy. It was a mutual decision, one that came after many conversations about our future and our family. We agreed not to have children. We were content just to be with each other. Finding these contraceptives now shattered that agreement, hinting at a secret life I was not part of. I stood in our garage, the cold morning air seeping through the cracks, making me shiver, or maybe it was the shock. Every rational explanation I tried to muster fell short, making way for a sinking feeling in my stomach. Could she be cheating on me? The thought made my heart heavy. I needed answers, but I didn't know if I was ready for them. Deciding to confront Emily directly seemed the straightforward choice, but my fear of what her answers might be held me back. Instead, I chose to watch and wait, to gather more evidence before facing what could potentially ruin our marriage. I needed to be sure before I shattered the image of the woman I loved, possibly beyond repair. Over the next few days, I paid close attention to Emily's habits and routines. She seemed more guarded, her phone almost always in her hand and never left unattended. Her late nights became more frequent, and she started taking calls outside, her voice a hushed whisper as she walked away from the house. Every action added weight to my growing dread. I also started noticing little things that were out of place. A receipt for a restaurant we had never been to together, a charge for a hotel room on our credit card statement during a week she was supposed to be visiting her sister, and more of those long, whispered phone calls. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The need for undeniable proof led me to take more drastic measures. I installed a GPS tracker on her car to see where she went during these mysterious late nights. The data it returned confirmed my worst fears. Emily wasn't at work, she was elsewhere, places that made no sense, unless there was someone else, someone I didn't know about. I also decided to check her social media and email. I guessed her password on the first try. It was the name of our first dog. As I scrolled through her messages, I found conversations filled with affection and plans, none of which included me. They were with someone named Mark, someone she spoke to with words that she hadn't used with me in years. Each discovery, each piece of evidence, felt like a fresh wound. I was gathering all this proof, but part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was some explanation that would make everything okay. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. The final straw came when I followed her one evening. I watched as she met up with this Mark at a small, dimly lit restaurant. I saw them laugh and touch, saw the way she looked at him, the way she used to look at me. I couldn't watch anymore. I left before they did, my mind made up. I went home and started packing a bag. When Emily came home that night, I was ready to confront her, to end the charade and face the reality of our broken marriage. But as she walked through the door, looking tired and sad, a part of me still wanted to believe there was some mistake, that the woman I loved couldn't have betrayed me like this. After finding the contraceptives in the car, I was torn about how to approach Emily. The direct route, confronting her with the box in hand, seemed tempting. Yet, every part of me hesitated. What if confronting her only pushed her away, or caused her to hide her actions more cleverly? I decided against immediate confrontation. Instead, I would observe quietly, collect undeniable evidence if there was any to be found. This way, when I finally brought up my concerns, she wouldn't be able to dismiss them easily. That evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, the air felt thick with unspoken words. I watched her laugh at a joke I made, but her laughter didn't reach her eyes. My mind was elsewhere, plotting the next steps of my quiet investigation. Later, when she excused herself early, claiming a headache, I knew this was my chance to begin my search. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, I went to her home office, a space she'd recently claimed was off limits, citing stress and the need for privacy. Inside, I rifled through her desk drawers, trying to keep everything as undisturbed as possible. Among the usual office supplies and stacks of papers, I found a small hidden compartment at the back of the last drawer. Inside, there were receipts for hotel stays and jewelry I had never seen her wear, and tickets for events we never attended together. My heart raced as each piece of paper added more weight to my fears. I took pictures of everything with my phone, careful to replace each item exactly as I had found it. As I heard the water stop running in the bathroom, I quickly slipped out of the office and back to the living room, my mind reeling with what I had discovered. Every part of me wanted to confront her then, to demand answers, but I knew that would end in more lies, more cover-ups. I needed more. I needed to see it for myself, to catch her in the act if it was happening. Over the next week, I made plans to follow her on one of her late work nights. I rented a nondescript car and wore a cap and dark glasses, thinking it might help disguise my identity if she saw me. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me. I felt like a character in a bad spy movie. Yet, the seriousness of what I was doing, the potential end of my marriage, loomed over me, heavy and dark. On the night I decided to follow her, I watched as she left the house in a dress that was too formal for a night at the office. My hands clenched around the steering wheel as I followed her car from a safe distance, my stomach in knots. She drove to the other side of the city, to a boutique hotel I recognized from one of the receipts. I parked across the street, watching as she entered the lobby, not alone, but laughing alongside someone who definitely wasn't a coworker, unless coworkers typically greeted each other with kisses on the cheek. Sitting there in the car, watching the entrance of the hotel, I felt a sense of finality settling over me. Whatever happened inside that hotel would likely dictate the course of my future. But first, I needed proof, undeniable proof, that could not be talked away or dismissed. That proof came sooner than expected, shaking the foundation of what I thought my life would be. It was time to confront Emily. The next morning, over breakfast, I casually brought up the topic of her frequent late nights and how they were starting to worry me. Her response was the same as always, reassuring me with vague details about projects and deadlines. This time, though, I pushed further, asking about the new colleagues she must be working with on these intense projects. Her answers came too quickly, rehearsed. Just the usual team, she said, avoiding eye contact. I could feel the air thickening between us as I edged closer to the real questions burning inside me. Emily, are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me? Anything at all that might be worrying you or affecting us? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though it trembled slightly. She hesitated, then shook her head, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. That's exactly what I'm doing, worrying about us. Why are you suddenly so interested in my work? You know how stressful it can be, she countered, her voice rising slightly. This wasn't going the way I had hoped. I needed to steer the conversation before it turned into an argument that would push her further away. I decided it was time to lay my cards on the table. Emily, I found something in your car yesterday, I began, watching her closely. Her face fell, and she suddenly looked very small, very vulnerable. I found contraceptives, Emily. Why would we need those? For a moment there was silence, a long, painful silence where I could almost hear her thoughts racing. Then she looked up, tears forming in her eyes. I can explain, she started, but her voice broke. Please do, I said, my heart sinking. Because I can't think of any reason that makes sense unless there's something you haven't told me, something big. Emily wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to speak. But it wasn't the confession I'd braced myself for. Instead, she spun a tale of buying them for a friend who was embarrassed to purchase them herself. It was absurd, and we both knew it, but she stuck to her story. I don't believe you, Emily. I want to, but I just can't. Not with all these late nights, secretive calls, and now this. I think there's someone else, I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. You're being ridiculous, she snapped, her usual composure slipping. I'm late. I need to go. And with that, she grabbed her purse and left, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and a cold cup of coffee. The confrontation had solved nothing. If anything, it only confirmed my fears. Emily was hiding something, and whatever it was enough to make her lie straight to my face. I knew then that I needed more than just her words. I needed proof. Only undeniable proof could bring the truth to light. With suspicions gnawing at me, I devised a plan to confirm Emily's infidelity. Using the GPS tracker I'd installed in her car, I monitored her movements meticulously. Each departure from our shared itinerary added a layer of dread to my growing unease. One evening, the tracker notified me of her car parked at a hotel downtown, a place she had no business being according to the routine she shared with me. Driven by a need for the unvarnished truth, I decided to follow her. I found myself parked across the street from the hotel, trying to catch a glimpse of her as she arrived. Sure enough, Emily's car pulled up, and she stepped out, not alone, but accompanied by someone I'd never seen before, a man whose presence made my heart sink. They laughed together, a sound that felt like a physical blow to my chest. Watching them was like observing a different Emily, one who was carefree and vibrant in a way that hadn't been directed at me in months. They entered the hotel without looking around, her hand brushing against his in a way that was all too familiar. It was an intimacy that she had reserved for me once, now shared openly with another. My initial plan to confront them then and there vanished under the weight of my emotions. Instead, I sat, frozen, a spectator to my own life unraveling. The images of them together haunted me as I drove home in a daze, the silence of the car amplifying the loud chaos of my thoughts. How long had this been going on? Were all those late nights at work just rendezvous with him? At home, the quietness of our bedroom mocked me. The bed we shared, once a place of intimacy and comfort, now felt like just another scene of betrayal. I lay there, sleep elusive, replaying over and over the sight of Emily with another man. The pain was palpable, a sharp sting that seemed to echo through the room. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. It wasn't just about what I saw, it was about respecting myself enough to confront the betrayal, to demand explanations, or at least acknowledge the truth. The next morning I sat at the kitchen table when Emily walked in, fresh from her return. Her smile, meant to greet me, faltered under the weight of my stern gaze. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I know about him." Her face drained of color, her usual poised demeanor crumbling. "I can explain," she started, but the weariness in my bones demanded more than justifications or excuses. "No, Emily, I need the truth. All of it. Now." The room filled with a tense silence, the kind that precedes storms, as I braced myself for the revelations that would change the course of our lives forever. The confrontation was inevitable, yet nothing could have prepared me for the raw emotions that unfolded. It began simply enough. I asked her directly about the man I saw her with, the moments they shared, which were meant to be exclusive to our marriage. The look on her face was a mix of fear and regret. She opened her mouth to speak several times, but seemed to struggle with the right words. When she finally spoke, her voice was a mix of defiance and resignation. "He's just a friend, someone from work. It's not what you think," Emily pleaded. Her explanation was feeble, and we both knew it. The evidence was too damning, the emotional disconnect too wide to bridge with weak excuses. "I saw you together, Emily. Don't insult us both by lying about it," I responded, my voice firmer than I felt inside. The weight of the truth seemed to press down on the room, making it hard to breathe. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the betrayal of our vows, the unraveling of a life we had built together over years. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked older, worn out by her own deceptions. "I'm sorry," she whispered, a confession that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "It started a few months ago. It wasn't planned. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." The simplicity of her apology did nothing to assuage the hurt. It felt like a bandage being ripped off, revealing a wound too deep to heal swiftly. "Why, Emily? Why him? Why lie to me? To us?" My questions filled the space between us, each one loaded with the weight of betrayal. She tried to explain, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It was loneliness," she said, "a feeling of disconnect when I worked long hours, the thrill of new attention. It was many things, none of which made sense to me." How could loneliness drive her into another's arms? Wasn't our love enough to bridge moments of disconnect? "I never stopped loving you," she insisted, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of understanding, of forgiveness. But what remained of my trust was shattered, scattered like glass under the weight of her admissions. Determined to understand the full extent of her betrayal, I pressed for details. "How often? Where? Does he know about me? About us?" Each answer twisted the knife deeper, outlining a double life I had been blind to. It was clear what needed to happen next. Despite the chaos of emotions, a path lay before me, one that involved legal and emotional separation. "I can't be with you, not after this," I declared, the finality of my own words surprising even me. It was not a decision made in anger, but in clarity, a recognition that some breaks were too fundamental to repair. As she sobbed, apologizing repeatedly, I felt a mix of pity and detachment. The woman I loved was still there, but obscured by layers of deceit. I needed to protect myself, to find a way to move forward from the wreckage of our marriage. After the initial shock and the painful admissions, it was time to deal with the practical implications of Emily's betrayal. Sitting across from her at our kitchen table, where we'd shared countless meals and dreams, I laid out the reality of our situation. "I've thought about this a lot," I began, trying to keep my voice even, "and I don't see how we can go back to how things were. Trust is the foundation of our marriage, and that's been broken. Emily nodded, her face pale and drawn. I understand, she said quietly. I'm so sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you like this. The simplicity of her apology, while sincere, did little to ease the pain. Sorry doesn't change what happened, I replied. I need to think about my future, about what's best for me, and I don't think that future includes you, not as my wife. The finality of my words seemed to settle between us like a heavy fog. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't protest. She knew as well as I did that some damages were beyond repair. We need to start thinking about separation, legally, I continued. I'll contact a lawyer and see what needs to be done. I think it's best if we handle this as amicably as possible for both our sakes. Emily wiped her eyes and nodded. I'll cooperate in any way I can, she offered. And I'll move out. I'll stay with my sister until we figure things out. The practicality of her response was a relief, but it underscored the finality of our marriage's end. We discussed logistics briefly, about separating our bank accounts, handling our lease, and dividing our possessions. Each topic was a reminder of the life we had built together, now unraveling thread by thread. As we talked, part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I held back. This distance was necessary, a boundary to protect my heart, as I grappled with the sense of loss and betrayal. I think it's best if we keep our interactions minimal as we go through this process, I suggested. It'll make things easier, less complicated. Of course, Emily agreed. Whatever you need to heal, I'll respect it. Her words, meant to soothe, felt like another reminder of the chasm between us. We finished our conversation with an awkward silence, each lost in our thoughts about the years we had shared and the uncertain future ahead. Protect myself to ensure I wasn't left vulnerable or more hurt than I already was. At the lawyer's office, the atmosphere was businesslike, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos inside me. The lawyer laid out the documents on the table, each form a stepping stone away from my current life. Given your situation, the lawyer began, we'll need to discuss grounds for divorce, division of assets, and any mutual agreements you might have reached with you. As Emily stood to leave, a part of me wanted to say something, to recapture a fragment of the love we had shared. But the moment passed, and she walked away, leaving me alone with the remnants of our life together. In the quiet that followed, I realized that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, legal processes, emotional upheavals, and eventually, hopefully, healing. But for now, I was left to navigate the wreckage, to find a way to move forward, one painful step at a time. The decision to contact a lawyer and initiate divorce proceedings was a heavy one, weighed down by the myriad of emotions I had experienced since discovering Emily's betrayal. It was a step that marked both an end and a beginning, an end to our shared dreams and a marriage I had believed in, and the start of a new, uncertain journey for me. Picking up the phone to call the lawyer felt like lifting 100 pounds. Each digit dialed was fraught with the gravity of the moment. When the lawyer answered, my voice was steadier than I felt. I need to discuss filing for divorce, I said clearly, the words sounding foreign, yet necessary. The lawyer, seasoned in such matters, responded with professionalism, asking for basic details and suggesting a meeting to discuss the specifics. We scheduled a consultation for the following day. That night, I found myself pacing the now too quiet apartment, reviewing what I wanted to say, what I needed to achieve from the divorce. It wasn't just about legally ending the marriage. It was about finding a way to her wife about the separation process. I nodded, absorbing the information, the legal terms feeling impersonal and cold. We talked about the house. Neither of us could afford it alone, so it would have to be sold. Our savings would be split, a numeric division of a life that had been about so much more than money. The lawyer advised me on how to protect my interests, recommending steps to secure my financial stability moving forward. As we discussed the details, a part of me still struggled with the reality that these legal steps were necessary, that this was not just a bad dream, but with each form filled out, each legal term explained, I felt a slow, reluctant acceptance settling in. This was real, and it was happening. The lawyer was thorough, ensuring I understood each part of the process. "It's important you think about your future," he said, looking at me with a blend of sympathy and professionalism. "This is about more than just ending a marriage. It's about setting the groundwork for your life moving forward." Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The legal process was in motion, my actions aligning with my decision to move on, but the emotional journey was just beginning. There would be days of doubt, moments of pain, and questions about whether I had done the right thing. Yet, amidst the tumult of emotions, there was a sliver of hope, a belief that eventually I would find my way to a new normal, to a place where I could look back without regret and forward with a sense of peace. Life after filing for divorce was a mixed bag of emotions and adjustments. The days immediately following were filled with a quiet that was both comforting and unsettling. I began reorganizing my life, both physically by rearranging the apartment to erase the echoes of Emily's presence, and emotionally by reaching out to friends and family for support. The reactions from those close to me varied. My family was supportive, having noticed the strain in our relationship even before I had acknowledged it. My friends were a mix of surprised and supportive, offering everything from a listening ear to invitations to get out of the house and engage with life again. These interactions were crucial, providing not just distraction, but also reaffirmation of life beyond my failed marriage. Professionally, I strove to maintain a facade of normalcy. Work became a refuge, a place to immerse myself in tasks and temporarily forget the turmoil. My colleagues, aware of the situation to varying degrees, offered subtle nods of support, covering for me when needed, or simply providing company during lunch breaks. Emotionally, the journey was less straightforward. There were moments of profound sadness, punctuated by feelings of betrayal and loss. I sought therapy, a space where I could unravel my feelings without judgment. It was there in the therapist's office, through conversations both painful and enlightening, that I began to understand the extent of the emotional toll and started to learn coping mechanisms. Therapy sessions often revealed the depth of my unresolved feelings about the divorce. I learned to acknowledge the anger and grief, to accept them as part of the healing process rather than emotions to be suppressed. Through these sessions, I also began to reflect on my own part in our relationship's deterioration, the signs I had ignored, and how I could grow from this experience. Personal hobbies and interests took on new significance. I returned to old hobbies that I had set aside during my marriage: photography, hiking, and reading. These activities were not just pastimes, but lifelines that reconnected me with aspects of myself that had been neglected. They reminded me of my identity beyond being a husband, aspects of myself that brought joy and fulfillment independently of my relationship status. Socially, I began to rebuild and expand my circle. Accepting invitations to social events was initially daunting, but each outing proved to be a step forward, a reinforcement of my independence and rebuilding of my social confidence. I also ventured into new groups, joining clubs and classes that aligned with my interests, which broadened my social network and introduced me to new friends and potential interests. Financially, adjusting to a single income required some changes. I reevaluated my budget, cutting unnecessary expenses, and focusing on saving and investing for future security. The practical aspects of managing finances alone were challenging, but ultimately empowering, as they reinforced my ability to manage independently. As the months passed, the sharp pain of betrayal dulled into a more manageable ache. I found strength in my daily routines, comfort in the support of loved ones, and hope in personal growth. The divorce, while an end, had also ushered in a period of significant personal development and a new understanding of my resilience and capacity for change. As weeks turned into months, the immediate sting of the divorce began to ebb, replaced by a broader perspective on my life and the breakdown of my marriage. This period of introspection brought clarity and, surprisingly, a sense of gratitude. The pain, while harsh, had forced me to grow in ways I might never have considered necessary had my marriage continued on its unfulfilling path. Reflecting on the relationship, I realized that trust, once broken, is not easily restored, but it is also not something to be guarded jealously or withheld out of fear. Instead, trust is something to be built, day by day, with each interaction and decision. My future relationships, whether platonic or romantic, would benefit from this understanding. The idea of trusting someone new was daunting, yet not insurmountable. I had learned to listen more deeply, not just to the words, but to the actions and the silences that speak volumes. Personal growth had been another significant outcome of this tumultuous chapter. I had learned to be alone without being lonely, finding solace in solitude that allowed for reflection and self-improvement. My journey through therapy had taught me the importance of emotional health and the strength in seeking help. Self-care had become a priority, manifesting in regular exercise, a balanced diet, and hobbies that nurtured my spirit and body. Professionally, the clarity and focus gained from navigating my personal crisis had unexpectedly improved my performance and productivity at work. Challenges that once seemed daunting now appeared manageable, and my interactions with colleagues became more thoughtful and effective. This newfound confidence spilled over into my social life, where I found myself more open to new experiences and connections. Looking to the future, the lessons learned from my failed marriage informed not only my approach to relationships, but also my understanding of myself. I recognized the importance of communication, not just in listening, but in sharing my thoughts and needs openly. I was more aware of the kind of partner I aspired to be and the type of partner I sought. The concept of starting anew was no longer intimidating. Instead, it was invigorating. I was ready to meet new people, explore potential relationships, and open myself to love, not naively, but with a mindful appreciation of what it means to build a partnership based on mutual respect, honesty, and joy. In closing this chapter of my life, I felt a mixture of solemnity and optimism. The road had been undeniably rough, the lessons hard-earned, but the future beckoned with promise and possibility. My experience had equipped me with the tools to navigate whatever lay ahead with grace and resilience. The end of my marriage was not just an ending, but a beginning, a chance to apply what I had learned, to embrace life's unpredictability, and to move forward with a hopeful heart.